The night that changed Vivien Miller's life began with a scream so sharp it cut through the Iron Horse Saloon like a knife. The men gambling inside froze. The piano stopped. Even the smoke in the air seemed to hold still. Jedediah Miller, half drunk and fully broke, slammed his cards on the table and shouted the words that would haunt Cheyenne forever. "She's deaf! Take her. She's useless to me." Every head turned as his daughter, 19-year-old Vivien, stood silently behind him like a shadow. Her dress was faded, her cheeks hollow, her eyes fixed on the floor. To the folks in town, she was the mute ghost. A girl who hadn't spoken a word since her mother died 6 years earlier. Her father told everyone she was deaf, dumb, and barely worth feeding. Tonight, he was proving it. Across from Jedediah sat Colt Ransom, the most feared enforcer in the Wyoming Territory. Broad-shouldered, stone-faced, and notorious for breaking bones as easily as glass, he stared at the trembling girl with cold disgust. "I ain't running a charity, old man," Ransom growled. "I want my money." "Not your broken daughter." Jedediah slammed his fist on the table. "She's strong. She cooks, she cleans, and she can't talk back because she can't hear a thing. She's worth $50 in labor." Vivien didn't flinch. She had mastered the art of stillness. For 6 years, silence had been her shield, the only thing that kept her safe from her father's rages and the dangerous men he dragged into her home. But today, her silence was about to sell her. Ransom leaned back in his chair, eyeing her like livestock. The saloon grew colder. Men who'd seen gunfights and lynchings felt their stomachs twist at the sight. "Fine," Ransom said at last. "The girl covers the debt." Jedediah threw his cards down with a sick grin, certain he had won. But when Ransom revealed 4 jacks, the old man's smile died. The room tensed. Ransom stood, reaching for Vivien's wrist. "Come here, girl." She braced for the grip she knew too well. But he never touched her. A shadow fell over the table, huge, silent, and colder than the Wyoming winter. Ryan Bear Conincaid. The massive mountain man stood nearly 6'7", wrapped in buffalo hide, with a beard thick as pine bark. He rarely came to town, and when he did, men cleared a path for him. Tonight, he didn't look at Ransom. He didn't look at Jedediah. He looked at Vivien. And in that long, quiet moment, he saw something no one else had noticed. Fear behind her stillness, intelligence behind her silence, and a spark fighting to stay alive. "How much is the debt?" Ryan asked, voice deep enough to shake dust from the rafters. Ransom scowled. "Stay out of this, mountain man." Ryan reached into his coat and dropped a heavy leather pouch on the table. The thump echoed through the saloon. Gold dust, more than enough to buy the debt 3 times over. "That's $60, Ryan said. "I'm buying the girl." Jedediah lunged for the gold instantly, proving to everyone what kind of father he was. "Sold." Ransom looked furious but not foolish. No one started trouble with Bear Conincaid unless they wanted to end up buried under snow. "Have it your way," Ransom spat. "But she's broken. A mute ain't worth a mule." Vivien stood still, heart pounding so hard she thought someone might hear it. She didn't dare show she understood what was happening. She couldn't. If she broke the line now, she was finished. Ryan stepped closer and motioned for her to follow. She hesitated, then obeyed. Anything was better than staying with her father. They walked out into the freezing wind. Snow swirled down Cheyenne's lone street as Ryan lifted her onto his massive horse, Thunder. When he climbed into the saddle and she settled behind him, she expected him to ride in silence. Instead, he turned his head, just slightly, and leaned close enough that only she could hear. "I saw you flinch when the chair scraped," he whispered. "And your breath caught when Jed said my gold." His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "I know you can hear me, little bird." Vivien's blood froze. For the first time in 6 years, someone had seen through her silence. Before she could react, Ryan kicked the horse forward. They thundered out of Cheyenne, heading for the dark, unforgiving ridges of the Laramie Mountains, a 3-day ride into the wilderness. Vivien clung to him, her hands gripping the buffalo hide coat. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. But she wasn't free. She was riding beside a man who knew her deepest secret. A man who didn't ask why she hid her voice. A man who didn't pity her for it. A man who simply said the words that cracked her world open. "I know you can hear." And as the cold wind tore through her shawl, Vivien realized something terrifying. This mountain giant hadn't bought a servant. He'd discovered a lie that could destroy them both. The trail into the Laramie Mountains was steep, narrow, and carved by years of harsh winters. Snowflakes drifted down like cold ash as thunder carried them deeper into a world where law meant nothing and survival meant everything. Vivien kept her hands tight on Ryan's coat, her heart pounding each time the horse stepped near a rocky edge. She had spent 6 years hiding inside silence, but now she was trapped in it. Ryan Conincaid hadn't confronted her, but he hadn't demanded answers. He hadn't even looked at her since leaving town. That scared her more than anything. Men like her father filled silence with violence or rage. Ryan filled it with something far more dangerous. Understanding. When the sun slipped behind the peaks, Ryan turned Thunder into a grove of aspen trees shielded from the wind. He dismounted, then helped Vivien down with surprising gentleness for a man his size. He moved like part of the land, slow, deliberate, steady. "Stay close to the fire," he said while gathering branches. He didn't raise his voice, but he spoke loud enough that she couldn't pretend not to hear. Not anymore. Vivien sat stiffly as he skinned a rabbit with practiced precision. When he said, "Salt," her body reacted before her mind did. Her hand twitched toward the saddlebag. She caught herself and froze. Ryan didn't turn. He only chuckled softly, seasoning the meat himself. "You're good at pretending," he murmured. "A lot better than the poker players down in Cheyenne. But I see the little things." Vivien forced her eyes on the fire. She had survived 6 years by staying invisible. She couldn't afford to slip. "My brother Elias was deaf," Ryan continued. "Lost his hearing in the war." He rotated the rabbit over the flames. "I learned to talk with my hands, learned to watch his face, his breath, his eyes." He finally looked up, and the firelight reflected in his dark irises like molten gold. "You don't move like Elias did. You listen. You react. Your eyes stay sharp." He tilted his head slightly. "Your silence isn't deafness, it's fear." Vivien's fingers curled in her lap. She wanted to speak. She wanted to scream. But her voice felt locked behind years of pain. So she did what she always did. She stayed silent. Ryan didn't push. When the meal was done, he handed her a tin plate, then banked the fire. She lay awake long into the night, listening to the wind claw at the mountains, wondering why this stranger had seen the truth in her so quickly. By sunrise, the sky turned steel gray. A storm was brewing. They continued climbing until the trail narrowed to a dangerous 4-foot ledge known as Dead Man's Drop, a sheer cliff on one side and a wall of rock on the other. "We walk from here," Ryan said, dismounting. Vivien followed behind Thunder, carefully placing her boots where Ryan pointed. The wind screamed through the canyon, stinging their faces with ice. Vivien's heartbeat thudded in her ears. Then it happened. Thunder slid. The horse's rear hoof hit a patch of hidden ice. His massive body lurched sideways, hindquarters slipping toward the cliff edge. The saddlebag jerked violently, and the rope tied around Ryan's wrist snapped tight, dragging him toward the drop. The mountains swallowed the sound of Vivien's gasp. Ryan's boots scraped helplessly against ice as he fought to pull the horse toward the wall, but the weight was too much. "Let go!" Vivien wanted to shout, but she had no voice. Not one she trusted. Ryan was seconds from being pulled over the cliff. Vivien didn't think. She acted. She dove to the ground, grabbed a jagged rock from the ledge, and slammed it behind the horse's hoof to give it traction. Then she yanked Thunder's tail with every ounce of strength in her body. "Get up!" The scream tore from her throat raw and sharp, the first word she had spoken in 6 years. Thunder scrambled, found footing on the lodged rock, and lunged toward safety. Ryan dropped onto the snow, breath knocked from his chest. Vivien froze in horror, hand still raised from the pole. Her voice had revealed the truth. Ryan sat up slowly, brushing snow from his beard. The wind whipped his hair, but he didn't seem to feel the cold. He looked at the cliff, then the trembling horse. Then he looked at her. She pressed herself against the rock wall, shaking her head frantically, pointing at her ear, trying to take it back, to rebuild the lie she had just shattered. Ryan stood, towering over her, but he didn't raise a hand. He didn't yell. He didn't smirk. He reached out gently and pulled the hood of her coat over her ears. "We have 5 miles to the cabin," he said softly. "We can talk about your voice when we get there. Or we can keep the quiet." He walked toward the horse, limping slightly. Vivien stood rooted to the frozen ground, tears burning in her eyes. He wasn't angry. He wasn't mocking her. He was offering something she had never been given, a choice. She wiped her cheeks, stepped away from the cliff wall, and followed the man whose life she had just saved. The cabin was small, warm, and shockingly neat. Books on the shelves, clean blankets, dried herbs hanging from wooden beams. He gave her the cot while he slept by the fire. For days, a silent routine settled between them. Vivien cooked, cleaned, and watched the blizzard swallow the world. Ryan read aloud at night, not to force her to answer, but to fill the cabin with something gentle. But the quiet couldn't last. One evening, while she stirred stew at the hearth, Ryan spoke with his eyes still on his book. "You hum when you cook." Vivien froze. "It's a soft sound," he said, finally looking up, "and it's in tune with the song that piano player was playing in Cheyenne." Her heart nearly stopped. "Why are you still pretending?" Ryan asked, voice low and steady. "Out here, no one will hurt you for speaking." "Not while I'm breathing." Vivien's spoon clattered into the pot. She turned away, scrubbing at the counter to hide her shaking hands. Ryan didn't go to her. He let the truth sit between them like a glowing ember. "You talk when you're ready," he said softly, "but don't think I don't see you." Vivien lay awake that night, staring at the rough pine ceiling, and when she finally whispered his name, so soft the darkness nearly swallowed it, it felt like opening a door she wasn't sure she could close again. The storm outside grew worse as December closed in. Snow piled so high against the cabin walls that the windows turned into pale squares of frozen light. Inside, the world was smaller, warmer, and strangely peaceful. Vivien cooked meals that filled the cabin with the smell of herbs and broth. Ryan read aloud in his low, steady voice, his words drifting like smoke toward the rafters. For the first time in years, Vivien wasn't surviving. She was living. But peace on the frontier never lasted long. One morning, Ryan pulled on his coat and strapped his revolver to his hip. "Trapline needs checking," he told her. "Be back before dark." Vivien nodded, watching him disappear into the endless white. But sundown came, then moonrise, then midnight. Still no Ryan. Vivien paced the cabin, her hands shaking. Every howl of wind felt like a warning. At last, a heavy thud hit the door. She unbarred it and dragged Ryan inside, as snow and blood spilled across the floor. A bear trap had torn into his leg. Not one of his, a poacher's. He was pale, freezing, barely conscious. Vivien didn't panic. She acted. She cut open the pant leg, poured whiskey over the mangled flesh, stitched the wound with shaking but steady hands, and wrapped it tight. She fed him warm broth when he drifted, and kept the fire alive through the long night. When his fever spiked, he clutched her wrist, lost in a delirium of memories. "Elias, don't go into the cornfield."
Vivien placed her hand on his cheek. "I'm here," she whispered.
"You're safe." Ryan's eyes fluttered open at the sound of her voice. Confusion, wonder, and relief flickered across his face. "Knew you could," he mumbled before falling back into sleep. For the next days, she nursed him with fierce loyalty. She barely slept. When he finally sat upright again, pale but clear-headed, he watched her chop carrots in the kitchen. "Who taught you to stitch like that?" he asked. Vivien turned, meeting his eyes without fear. "My mother," she said, before she died. Ryan smiled weakly. Your voice is strong. A good voice. She felt heat rise in her cheeks. You talk too much. He laughed, though it turned into a cough. That brief warmth between them felt like spring inside a frozen world. But the mountain was not done testing them. A gunshot cracked through the quiet, echoing off the canyon walls. Then another. Vivien ran to the window. 3 riders moved like dark wolves across the snow. Ransom's men, they had tracked them. Ryan's jaw tightened. He reached for his revolver, checking the cylinder. Those rifles are Winchesters. Poachers don't carry repeaters. And they don't fire warning shots.
He looked at her. They're not coming to take you, Vivien. They're coming because they think you stole something.
Vivien's stomach twisted. She reached into her pocket. A small silver watch sat there, heavy, cold, hiding a secret. She had taken it from her father's coat the night before the poker game, and forgotten all about it. She opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper covered in numbers and coordinates. A map. Ryan studied it, and his face went pale. This is the lost Union Army payroll from 65, he whispered. A fortune. Ransom doesn't think you're a servant, Vivien. He thinks you're the key to gold that went missing in the war. Shots thundered against the cabin walls. Splinters flew across the room. The siege had begun. Ryan dragged himself to the firing cracks in the logs. Vivien grabbed the Winchester. Her hands trembled so hard she nearly dropped it. They'll try to burn us out, Ryan said. If they reach the woodshed, they'll light the cabin like tinder. You stop them. I can't, she cried. I can't kill. Ryan grabbed her shoulder, eyes blazing. You aren't killing a man, he said. You're stopping a monster. You saved me on the cliff. Save us now. Vivien swallowed her fear. She moved to the back window. A man sprinted toward the woodshed carrying a bottle of kerosene. She lifted the rifle, tucked it tight, aimed, and fired. She missed the man, but hit the stump beside him, spraying bark into his face. The man stumbled, panicked, and fled behind the tree line. You turned him back, Ryan said. Good girl. The firing stopped at dusk. Then night fell. Silent, cold, deadly. Vivien tended Ryan's wound. He fought to stay awake. If I pass out, he rasped, you take the gun. You hold the door, you live. No, Vivien whispered fiercely. You promised to finish the story. But midnight brought the real terror. A soft thump hit the roof. Then another. Smoke drifted down from the rafters. The cabin was burning. They're throwing torches, Ryan said. They're smoking us out. Vivien helped Ryan to his feet. The roof roared with fire. We have to get to the barn, she said. Thunder is there. I can't walk fast enough, Ryan gasped. You go. I'll cover. No, she said, voice sharp as steel. We go together, or we die together. She dragged him toward the back door. On 3, she kicked it open, and they stumbled into the snow. Gunshots cracked. A bullet tore through the air and hit Ryan in the shoulder. He collapsed. Vivien screamed his name and pulled him with everything she had. The barn was close, too close and too far at the same time. She dragged him inside just as another bullet splintered the wood behind them. Thunder panicked in his stall. Ryan slumped near the hay, barely conscious. Floorboards, he gasped, dunder the tack box. Vivien shoved the box aside, pried up the planks, and found 3 sticks of dynamite. Outside, Ransom's boots crunched in the snow. Nowhere left to go, little bird, he called. Give me the map. Vivien looked at the dynamite, at the barn wall, at the mountain slope behind it, and she understood. You didn't give me a grave, Ryan, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. You gave me a voice. She kissed his forehead. Then she stood, lit the fuse, and hurled the dynamite at the weak beams beneath the snowpack. Ransom, she shouted. This isn't your gold. It belongs to the mountain. The explosion tore the barn open and triggered the avalanche. The world became a roar of white. Vivien dove onto Ryan, covering him as the mountain fell. Snow crushed the barn, swallowing everything in its path. Then darkness. Hours passed, then days. They huddled in a small pocket of air under the collapsed beams. Vivien dug through snow with frozen hands. She whispered stories, old songs, anything to keep Ryan alive. On the third morning, a sliver of light appeared. Thunder, still alive, had kicked his way through the collapse. Vivien clawed through the snow until she dragged both herself and Ryan into the blinding daylight. Ransom and his men were gone, claimed by the same mountain they had tried to use against her. It took a week to reach Fort Laramie. By spring, Ryan's leg healed enough for him to build a new cabin in the Wind River Range. Vivien stayed by his side, her voice growing stronger each day. One morning, she stepped onto the porch in a blue dress, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Ryan sat whittling cedar, sunlight warming the scars on his face. "Trader came by," he said. "Rumor is the map was lost in an avalanche." Vivien pulled the silver watch from her pocket. The paper inside was gone. She had burned it in the snow cave their first night trapped. "We don't need gold," she said softly. "We have enough." She tossed the empty watch to him. Ryan caught it, smiling. He took her hand, not as a savior, not as an owner, but as a partner. The mute ghost of Cheyenne was gone. In her place was Vivien Miller, a woman who found her voice in the silence of winter, and Bear Conincaid, the man who listened.